we'll start. Okay, so at 4:01, we'll start. We have several people who need to leave at 5. I need to leave at 5:15, so hopefully we can run through the business we have as quickly as possible. Gordon Beck is here. Nobody knows about this except me and Gordon. But Gordon asked if he could come present an idea he has to the committee. I think it ties in nicely with the memorandum we're going to be discussing later in the meeting. This isn't going to be an in-depth discussion, but he just wanted 5 minutes or so to get the idea in front of the group. I think is that the idea, Gordon? So the floor is yours.
If 5 is the magic number, I'll keep it under 5 minutes. I'm with the Sustainability Committee, and I also work with the Climate to Thrive, installing EV charging stations throughout rural Maine. As most of you, I'm sure, know, there is a EV charging station due to go into the Knowles lot. That was due in earlier this year, but it'll happen this fall for a variety of reasons. In any event, in my work over the last several years, it's become clear that these stations that we're putting in, these level 2 charging stations, and I won't go into all the details, but basically for an hour of charging, you get 25 miles of range. They're great for houses. They're great for places where people are going to spend a couple of hours. That's what we've been doing. They're affordable. They don't require massive electrical infrastructure. They're fine, but as we get further into the EV transition, more and more people are looking for fast chargers. Trying to get as close to the gas station fill-up experience as possible. The issue there is that they cost an enormous amount of money. Efficiency Maine has funded through the VW settlement funds a variety of EV fast charging stations along 95. Now we'll get one in Ellsworth at the Hannafords, a few other places. But again, they cost usually well over a couple of $100,000 to put them in. EV drivers will pay for the electricity they use, but it's the capital cost of putting them in.
Excuse me, how much did you say? A couple of $100,000?
Yeah.
That's per charging station.
Per charging station, It varies. But generally speaking, you're looking north of $200,000 for any of these types of installations. The issue is you have to bring in major voltage. It's not normally readily accessible. So you have the utility involved. You've got transformer, you've got all these major expenses in addition to the equipment itself. So in a nutshell, I was interested to find out that there is a company that makes a charger that actually has a battery in it. It uses the same power source that the one, for example, we have down at the marina, the one we're putting in the Knowles lot, the same 240 volt service, but it delivers fast charging. And so it occurred to me that that might be a project that this group might consider funding. I don't have all the hard answers right now because I've been chasing various people, and I don't have Tony Smith to say, oh yeah, we could just put it in there, no problem. However, the units themselves cost, for 2 ports, cost about $135,000 to $150,000. But there's realistically no other infrastructure make-ready charges or costs. So it's perceived as a really nice way to upgrade from a level 2 charging station to fast charging. We, Climate to Thrive, sustainability, we don't have that kind of money. But as an amenity for this town to offer, one of the very few places to date on the island that would have fast charging, there may be something in Bar Harbor eventually, but probably not this year. I thought it might be an idea worth you all consider. And again, the idea would be that the development corporation would fund the cost of buying the equipment, and then the details would be worked out, whether it's on a town account and the town essentially manages the pass-through of stuff, or whether the corporation would want to handle that as well. So I sort of tossed that out there as a concept to be considered. I'm continuing to do research and get answers on some of the questions that I'm sure you all would have. But it struck me as a really cool idea to put Northeast Harbor sort of on the map as a destination for tourism, for people who are now looking more for fast charging, where hang out for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and they're like, yeah, this is great. And the operational cost should be close to zero once it's installed, because you charge the drivers a fair rate for their use of the charging station, and virtually everybody who has an EV out there is used to doing that if they're driving on that. My 5 minutes were
Okay.
a minute ago.
So,
Thank you.
so Gordon wanted to get this idea kind of up on the table. My thought was that the next meeting, we might have him come answer in more detail. If there are any pressing questions now, let's ask them. But we
I have one
Yeah.
question. I've always wondered, why isn't any private company doing this?
Because it costs a lot of money to put them in, and you can't really make money on them yet, because you'd have to charge the drivers enough to cover the cost of just operating it, the cost of the electricity, and then be tacking on to chip away at that capital expenditure.
So the one we have now, you said, how many minutes of charging?
The 25, an hour of charging delivers around 25 miles of range.
So it's really an overnight kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, technically it's a 7.2 kilowatt output as opposed to a 50 or higher. And the station unit that I'm proposing, if there's one car, it's putting out 120, which is very nice, fast speed. If there's two cars, it's 60 each, which is a very nice fast speed.
So two, one is we don't have any money. But it's
But I thought that was what we do.
well, we would have to find it.
Yeah.
We don't have it. But
And I mean, I thought of a private donor who was really into EVs, might, be somebody who'd say, yes, this is something I could.
totally, no, but we don't have it in the bank. It's
Understood.
And the other is my son, who is arriving on Friday with a very bad case of shingles, but lives in San Francisco, is in this energy battery business. And I think you guys might want to talk.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'd love it. It's a very fast evolving arena.
That was my question to you, Gordon. How quickly is the technology evolving? In other words, if we waited 3 years, would it? I'm not suggesting we should. I'm just
Right.
saying that some of these things get.
They do. The problem is none of us have the crystal ball. If we were having this conversation 3 years ago, I couldn't tell you what it would be like right now, what
Yeah.
we know now.
Yeah.
This equipment that I'm talking about didn't exist back then
Yeah.
in any kind of viable fashion.
Some days probably what are now filling stations will be charging stations.
Well, they are. Irving is putting in fast chargers, et cetera. There are private companies who are doing it because they're already sort of in that business and to help consolidate their
Who
business.
owns the one down?
At the marina, I don't want to get into the whole long story, but it's a realistically no cost to the town. It was provided for and it's maintained by the marina.
And that's the slow charging one.
That's we now call them slow. We used to
The max-
years ago.
It used to be just a great charger.
I think it's interesting because there's basically three factors when it comes to sort of expanding the use of EVs as far as consumers go. One is range, and that's constantly improving, and you can get several hundred miles out of some of these batteries. Two would be cost, and we see what the cost of cars is doing, but the EVs are now right in line with what you pay for a combustion engine. And the third thing is charging, and especially in a rural area like this, we're always sort of the tail end of everyone's return on investment. So at some point, it's probably going to take some municipal little kick in the rear to get things going here.
I just had a conversation with a group in Blue Hill area who are saying, we don't want to talk about level 2 chargers. We want to figure out how to crack the nut of doing fast charging, because that's where I have an EV. That's what I want
Yeah.
if I'm traveling somewhere.
Yeah.
So Anyway, sorry to take up.
No,
That's
thank
a
you.
good idea.
Dumb question. Works off of that.
It works, it's tied to the grid, it's tied to the same power source,
And the
but it has a
grid-
battery within it that
Right.
trickle charges the battery essentially, and the battery is big enough
Now,
to pump out.
if people are using this, does the battery run down?
It will. It's charging while it's being used, but not at the same rate. So at some point, it will be depleted. However, I think it's 19 cars have to be
Okay.
running on the thing. And that's among the research that I'm trying to really get those hard numbers, because marketing pitches are one thing and reality is something else. But it's definitely better than not having it. And if the battery is depleted, it's a level 2 charger. I mean, it's the same difference. So you're never worse than level 2. And most of the time you're far better.
And with the fast charging station, how long would it take a car to get fully?
The answer to that is depends on the car, size of the battery, and your state of charge.
Yeah,
You know, if you're a total empty, virtual empty, it can take you 3 or 4 hours. If you've got a massive Tesla long-range battery, it could take you an hour if you've got something much smaller.
Yeah.
Or typically, you're gonna get to 80% in something in the 20 to 40 minute range.
The charging rate is not a straight line.
Right.
That's.
It'll charge very quickly up to about 80%, and then it slows itself down, et cetera, et cetera.
good idea.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
So we can get back into this, if we want, in the context of the memo, but it does kind of strike at the infrastructure item in the brainstorming memo. My 2 cents, just before we move on, I think one of the biggest risks to this kind of thing is obsolescence.
Yeah.
You invest $150,000 in something, and 12 months later, it's obsolete, but that's.
Yeah.
something
Like
to
the ones
think
we've
about.
got down here that turn out to be too slow.
No, right, right. So if we can return to the agenda, the first item is approval of the April 14 minutes, for a motion to approve.
Do we have a quorum as the secretary?
We
Good question.
do not, I don't think we have.
Do we have anybody on Zoom?
Nobody in Zoom, so. 1, 2, 3,
I'm not,
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
yeah, but
We,
Matt, you didn't count me.
I didn't count you
Okay,
in that,
good.
so we have, or Derwin, so we have 8, so I guess we do.
Okay.
That may have been the quickest meeting we ever had. if we
Yeah.
Well, you still
did.
need- So anyway, I will now accept a motion, if there is one, to accept the minutes of the April meeting.
So, second,
And moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Who moved?
Anybody opposed?
I think I did.
Kathy did.
It's Kathy.
Hate this job.
I hear you.
The next item, election of officers. That's probably why attendance is so low tonight.
right,
But
who's
there's
not
always a
here?
risk associated with that.
I see.
There, we need to, currently, we have no vice chair because Wendy resigned in the middle of the year. And mine, who was the secretary, also resigned. Jamie kindly stepped up to take his place. I am the chair, and as those who've been on the committee know, 2 years ago, I said I would do it for 1 year. Yeah, so we need to, we got to have people to step up to take leadership if we're gonna get anything done. In that spirit, I am willing, very willing to step aside, but I'm also willing to do it for another year if that would be helpful to the group.
so moved.
It would be wonderful if you.
Thank you.
How many years will you say that? One?
Talk about obsolescence, is that
One.
the position?
We don't-
Because we do need to, we have to have people who are willing to.
Right.
To take some leadership, particularly at the moment. Again, another item in your memo, we're sort of rudderless. We have, as Jamie said, we have no money and we also have no staff. So other than that, we're fully
We're great.
functional. All right, so we need someone to be a vice chair. Really, the only role of the vice chair is to stand in for the chair if there's a meeting that I cannot attend.
No, I'll do it.
That would be wonderful, Megan.
Megan, your
Thank
chance.
you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
And
That's great.
Jamie, not to put the arm on you, are you willing to continue on as secretary?
Unless somebody else wants to do it.
Desires the post.
Well, one of those people who ain't here.
I think that's a great idea. That's what happens when you don't show up, right?
Yeah. Problem with the secretary is you have to have somebody who is going to be here. Well, I guess we have 3 volunteers. Is there a motion to approve that slate?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor,
Aye.
opposed?
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's always a boost of ego to get elected to a post that nobody wants.
By acclamation.
I think we do need to have at least a core group that'll keep things moving. So, and it's not a hugely heavy lift, but we do need to keep things moving. Okay, next item on the agenda was to have some brief updates. 2 of them are in Tony's bailiwick. I didn't know, Kathy, do you know anything about the parking situation? Yeah. Tony had the ball at the last meeting to follow up on that, so I guess we'll have to carry those over until the next.
We have put a call out for the traffic committee, which would maybe
Right.
have some input
Right,
on parking.
right. I
I
think,
thought we had left it off that the chief of police
Yeah,
wanted
Tony
to do
and-
it
We did.
quietly.
We did, but
Tony
there was
did
some
not have
interest, there was some interest from people to be on the traffic
Oh,
committee, the existing people and some additional people. So,
okay,
Because of parking.
yeah,
okay.
So there's a newly
Well,
constituted committee, is
we're-
there?
I haven't got any volunteers.
we haven't,
yet.
but there was some
People just
interest
wanted
in
a
starting
committee.
a.
They didn't necessarily want to be on the committee, right?
Or
They-
chair the committee?
There was some interest in starting another traffic committee in Seal Harbor, and we invited the people who were interested to come and join the whole. But if nobody shows up and nobody wants to volunteer, then we may consider disbanding that committee.
Right. Okay.
But it's kind of in limbo right now. But yes, we do feel, and the chief feels that a lot of things can be resolved with the, between parties, Jim and Tony, basically.
And they were gonna, that's where we left it the last
Yeah.
time. The 2 of them were gonna get their heads together, so.
Dan, you'll be interested in talking about parking today. When I left for lunch, I think for the first time,
It's a full.
that one was full.
Was it?
Yeah, first time I've
I
seen.
know,
that.
a lot of people downtown
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So,
They're not hiking because it's raining.
I was happy.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, I go out every day around noontime and count vacant spaces in the gray cow.
Yeah.
To keep track of that, so.
And there usually are.
There are, the lowest we've had is 15 and the highest is up to 35 or something. like that.
Vacant.
Vacant spaces,
Wow.
yes, available spaces. And part of the reason that we're doing that is for our building, we have not done the end of the landscaping because of the Main Street project and some electrical issues going around that's going to tie into the transformer there. They're not going to do that until they get the Main Street done. We have slotted 3 more spaces for parking on our site, but we can't do it until the pole and the guy wire are moved to make space for them, and that's not going to happen. So, and I see that the Seacoast Mission staff, they don't park in the parking spaces we do have, and there are still empty spaces. Do we need more asphalt in this area? Will Kim Keen make us put that in there since it was on our plan and we've been approved for it? So I'm keeping track, and I'll do that for the whole summer
Yeah. well,
to
that's
say,
good.
do we
And
need
that's-
more
That's
spaces?
certainly consistent with
Yeah.
what I.
What are
found
you
when I
keeping
did it
track of?
years ago.
Pardon?
Available.
I'm keeping track of available spaces in the Gray Cow parking lot. Every day around noon, between noon and 1:30, generally speaking.
I think
So
it's been, at least in my opinion, there's been a gap between perception and reality in terms of the need for parking. If you, Main Street fills up, but if you're willing to park there, there's usually parking. Yeah.
And I tell you, the Summer Residents Association, I think they're meeting next week, but somebody should pipe up about that because you've got facts and they don't want to hear it.
They perceive it to be a parking problem.
Well, and you know, the irony of, yes, everybody would like to park right on Main Street because it's convenient, but wherever they live elsewhere,
Right.
they park in
Right.
malls and everywhere else and walk far.
Right. And of course, the other reality is that for 10 months out of the year,
There's nobody on Main
there's
Street.
nobody on
Nobody.
Main Street, right?
I get shocked if there's 2 cars. I'm like, what's going on? Yeah,
Who's here?
right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's as far as probably we can take parking today. Broadband, Kathy, you
That's me. So the broadband committee has been meeting regularly. We have a lot of older holdovers who were on the committee that don't show up, but we have several who are regulars, and we recruited a couple of new people. So Scott McFarland is our chairman. He was made chairman at his first meeting. Pete Kufari, who's a young man, like in his 40s, and he's got a new business, a technology business. He's got a software business right here in Northeast Harbor, so that's great. Wendell Oberwall, who is the tech person for the school system, he's on the committee. Lily Pugh is on there, so that's kind of our regular, and Matt and Derlin as well. So we've been meeting on a regular basis. We had reached out to the Island Institute, which has done a ton of work on broadband along offshore islands and coastal communities, because they recognize this is an important consideration for economic development for all of these communities. So we reached out with a question, and they have had somebody who's their broadband expert attending all of our meetings every month. And she's been wonderful in giving us very good advice and guidance. And so we have also, the town of Mount Desert is part of the second cohort in this program called Vetro Cares for Maine. There's a Maine-based Portland area business called Vetro Fiber Maps. And they started in Maine. They got Maine state funding through Maine Technology Institute, and they have a worldwide base of customers who are communities or businesses installing broadband, who use their GIS mapping system to design and track fiber optic networks in different communities. And they wanted to do something nice for the state of Maine that gave them a lot of support. So they created this program called Vetro Cares for Maine. And they were reaching out to communities that had some activity going on and had a real broadband committee. And so they actually reached out to our town to see if we wanted to do it. And the town selectmen said, yes, let's do that. So we've been working with them, and they have done an auto design for us of what fiber optics would look like around the town to reach every structure, every home or business. And so it's a free service for us to do this. So we have this design. And the next step would be, all right, so as they say, this is a good talking point, this is a good conversation starter, but you need to, use this information to go somewhere else. And they're working out some cost estimates for what it might cost as well. And their part of that is the bill of materials of how much fiber line you're going to need and how many pedestals and how many splices and all of that. And that comes to under about $1.5 million. And he says, the labor on top of that, you could double it. But I did a little look back at what the town has done for connecting our town police department with the Bar Harbor Police Department, because that's something else that we weren't working on, but the town is working on, and looked at the number of poles and the make-ready expense for poles. I have had such an education in broadband, it's unbelievable, going in like knowing nothing. It's like, okay, now I have all this new language I have to incorporate here. So the part of the real expense of putting in fiber is you're attaching it to poles along the way. And there's something called a make-ready expense that you have to pay to the owner of the pole, which is largely Consolidated Communications. Spectrum might have some. And that can be hundreds of dollars per pole. Well, there were 152 poles to get from the town office to the high school. So extrapolating on that, figuring out we've got more than 2,000 poles then, because we've got 200 miles of fiber if we connect the whole town. We're talking about 10, and so I looked at the estimation for cost based on what was done just for that one line from the town to the high school. And it was about $47,000 per mile, because it's only a 5-mile stretch. But Island Institute says if it's a municipally owned system, they think it could be $30,000 per mile. So we're somewhere between $6 and $10 million to do the whole town. But that's still less than Tilson had suggested in 2015, which was more like 15 to 16,000 dollars, so $1 million. So we've got some progress on there, and we're trying to get an estimate for having somebody do the design work for doing the whole town if we want to go that way. We've also done a survey. So everybody who got their tax bill in the mail also
Did my
got
survey today.
this broadband survey. Thank you, Dan.
Didn't pay the tax bill, but I did the
But-
survey.
Exactly. So the idea of this is, who are you, where do you live, so that we have an address for you, so we can plot that all over town. Do you have service? How fast is your service? So we're getting people to connect and do a speed test, which we're trying to promote anyway. Who's using it? Are you using it for work? Are you using it for school? Are you happy with it? Are you unhappy with it? Who do you use now, et cetera? And so
And what does it cost you?
well, we didn't ask what it cost you, but we asked, how much
what's
are you
your
willing to
max?
pay?
Yeah.
What's the maximum that you would want to pay? And so we have, so we did this paper survey, but we're also trying to get people to do an online survey. And we've been working with Vetro to do that, because they would automatically, they have a nice system, they will look at they'll analyze results for us, and they will automatically do that speed test from the same service that we would do. But they weren't quite ready. So we in our office did a Google form and had that connected with the town website. So it's the same questions. And I picked up today, I have 30 paper responses to the survey, and it only went out last week. So, but we have 41 people who responded online. So people are doing this, which is good. And so we're looking at some of that answer, and so far, most people, well, 48%, so the highest number, are in the Soamesville area. Most people, 54% of the people who responded are residential. The residence is vacation or second home. They mostly have, 95% have internet. The biggest chunk is cable through Spectrum, that's over 80%. And $75 is the right dollar figure for that. And actually, yes, a lot of people use it, 75% plus use it for work. And a bunch of schools as well, schoolwork. And 66% are happy with their current service. So we might not need to do the whole town, but this will help us identify. So if we have real addresses and we can look at speeds, look at services, we can figure out where do we need to fill the gaps to bring everybody on board if we want to do that. So
the
that's all.
the 6 to 10 million, just to look at the big picture, is that to each resident?
It would be, yes, it would be fiber to the premises or fiber to the home. So every building that is a home or a commercial building, it would be to each residence.
Even ones with long driveways that are.
Yes. Yeah.
It seems to me we shouldn't get too hung up on the cost. It's encouraging that apparently it's come down since
Yes.
and there is going to be money, government money available. It seems to me in my view, our objective ought to be as far down the road and positioned so that when that money comes available, we are in a position to pounce and not at that point say, well, let's start to get our act together and take 2 years to get our act together.
Do you know when that's gonna, it's been kind of vague on when that's gonna free up.
They've already started.
Right.
They have, the money goes from the state
Right.
through the bond, through the Connect Main
County.
Authority. They have already done 1 or 2 rounds of funding and given away about half of that $15 million.
Right.
But there's, so the other half of that funding that the state put in through the bond last. But then there's the federal money
It's the federal
that will
money,
be
that's
a
the-
lot more.
that's the-
Yes.
And where does that go to Augusta or does?
It
go
goes
to
through
us?
Augusta. It goes through Augusta, and I think that they can determine how it is to be spent. And so the state is also setting up a whole new entity. The Connect Main Authority had very little authority. So they're creating this other connection authority, which will be bigger and actually can invest in infrastructure itself. So it is a bigger deal. It's a bigger machinery. Because right now, I think they have 2 or 3 people who work for the Connect Main Authority, and they do a ton of work and they're really good at what they do, but it's too small to do everything. So they rely on committees to do, town committees to do a lot of work and do the prep work.
So should we be talking to our state legislators?
Well, so some of the criteria that have come down through the Connect Main Authority. So I also attend a lot of those monthly meetings of Connect Main Authority and the main broadband coalition that the town has also joined as well. They are really looking for a good application would be you're shovel ready. You've done your homework. You know exactly what you want. You've connected with your residents who are going to support this because there's always going to be some municipal funding that's going to go into this. And that they would much prefer a regional approach, not a town by town approach. So we actually reached out with Derlin's help to the League of Towns and asked the other towns, are you interested in working with us? Here's what we're doing. Are you interested in working with us in any capacity? And Bar Harbor and Tremont and then Trenton. I did have a good conversation with Rachel Noble from Trenton that Matt had suggested we have a conversation. So I know that those 3 towns are interested in something. Bar Harbor is much further along than we are already. I think that they put out a townwide vote to fund a municipal network. And, so I think they need to work through the details of that. Tremont is interested, but they're also in a transition there of management. They just have a new town manager. And Trenton is interested. They have spectrum covering a lot of their town, but not every place. I think the same kind of condition that we're in.
Southwest Harbor.
And Southwest Harbor has not expressed interest. We're gonna go around them. We're
Because
gonna
they
go
don't
down and
have
see
a
it.
manager yet.
And exactly, so they're in transition on their management. as well.
Nor do they have a chair of the board of selectmen.
Right.
Oh, my word, so.
So it may be a while before they
It
can
could-
really
Exactly.
decide where they want to go with this whole business.
So we're working quietly on that regional approach side of things. And for the community engagement, we've also decided that we've sort of devised a series of public meetings that the broadband committee would host, and I'm hoping some other people will show up at those meetings. And so we start off with sort of a kickoff of bringing people up to date on here's where we are so far. And then bringing in people from the Island Institute, the Maine Broadband Coalition, and the Connect Main Authority to say, here's the state perspective. Here's where those would answer our questions about federal funding coming in, what's the expectation, et cetera. That we would like to reach out to other communities who have already gone through this to figure out which route they took. Some towns like Islesboro and Vinyl Haven, they put in their own system. The towns of Baileyville, Calais, and Alexander, and now other towns are joining them. They did some bonding and they created their own quasi-municipal network. And they're that is sort of spreading out as well. But other towns just worked with the incumbent providers, Spectrum or Consolidator or whomever else they had in that community to expand what they were doing. And sometimes those businesses, the private businesses, they can get funding from the state to expand into certain neighborhoods. So that's another route to go. So we want to hear from Spectrum and Consolidated directly. What are your plans for this community or this neighborhood in the next 5 years? Where do you have services now? Where do you have fiber that we can expand upon it? So we could have a series of questions for them. So we will invite them to participate with us. And then there's also this, this is great. There's an entity called the National Digital Equity Center based in Machias, Maine, of all places. It was started by Susan Corbett, who started Axiom Technologies. And this is a superb Yankee story. This woman moved up to Maine, to Jonesport, Maine, with a technology-based business. She had a bunch of people who were doing medical transcriptions that she used to do in Massachusetts. Now she's doing it on the coast of Maine. She's got a bunch of people in her old farmhouse. Well, they have terrible broadband. They don't have internet access. So she created Axiom Technologies to create the internet infrastructure in Washington County, and it has expanded. So Axiom has really done a ton of work. They're the entity that put in all of the internet, the fiber optic cable on the Cranberry Islands. Susan retired from that business, but stayed with it and created this National Digital Equity Center to make sure that everybody can connect, that you're not left out because you're old or you're poor or you're down a long driveway, that everybody should have access and should have the laptop or the iPad if they need it and learn how to use it. So they give out free equipment and they give classes and they'll connect you with somebody to help teach you how to use this so everybody can stay connected. So it's a great effort. So we want to have her at one of our sessions as well.
Yeah.
And by the end of this, so we're thinking of a series of 7 meetings. We're going to start the first one on July 27, which is a couple of Tuesdays away. We're trying to get some information out now. So this is what Daryl and I were talking about. We're going to get some Facebook information out there, et cetera. And then during this process, we'll be collecting all the surveys, and we'll wrap up with, here's what the town tells us we want, we need, we have, the direction we should move in. So
That's great.
If I remember right, Islesboro got a ton of money from the state.
they could have, yeah.
And that was really surprising because of their profile. So it might be worth talking to somebody, somebody there.
That may also be worth trying to connect with our congressional delegation, because the big money is going to be the federal money.
Yeah.
And Angus King is very interested in this issue, so he might be someone.
But that's true for every town in the state.
Of course.
And the town of Mount Desert has far greater resources than others. So if you're
We can't
comparing
leave
apples to
poverty.
apples,
Right.
exactly, we might not be high on the list.
Right.
uh,
Unless-
For need,
Unless we're, yeah.
unless we're ready to go.
We're ready to
Exactly.
go.
And we're putting some of our own money into it.
Right.
Then it's a more regional approach.
Yeah.
So if you balance Mount Desert with Tremont and Trenton, you might get a very different story of demographics, impact, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why we would want to do this, not alone, but with others.
I suggest that when you're publicizing the July 27th meeting, you use something besides Facebook, because.
Yes. If you don't have internet, you don't have Facebook.
Right, well, not only that, but some people
Don't.
hate it.
Yes. Well, we need to get word out in the Islander,
Yes,
and we're
yeah.
talking about, everybody
We put it on
signs
the
up for
town, yeah.
information. So we want to have stuff on the town website.
Yeah.
Post
But
office.
also email, email lists. People sign up. I want information from this committee or that committee. So I get planning board
Yes, yes,
notices and
yeah, I do
selectmen's
too. Yeah,
notices.
yeah.
So those kinds of things as
Yeah,
well.
great.
Just something on the bulletin board at the post office is helpful.
It's a good idea.
Yes, yes,
The
yes.
bank and the library, all those places. yeah.
What does Vetro say, if anything, about obsolescence with all this hard wiring that we're doing? And I know we've talked about 5G and how the island topographically is not a good candidate. And I just worry that all this research and all this work gets done and then poof, we don't need it anymore.
Well, I think that the thing about fiber optic cable is
Right.
that is the future proof, because it's just a simple medium. Whatever you connect on the ends of it, that's what's going to keep changing over.
Okay.
The topography of the island is not conducive to Wi-Fi because too many trees, too many mountains, too wide a space across the sound, whatever. So wiring to somebody's house, that's the future proofing that anybody would recommend.
Okay.
So I think that the committee before my time looked at small cell technology,
Right.
like red zone.
Right.
And they said, you know what, this isn't gonna work. And everybody keeps talking about satellite. It's like, it's not great now. It will get better, but we're gonna have so much space junk up there
Yeah.
someday, which
Yeah.
is gonna be terrible. But also right now, if you're using satellite, which is great if you're really remote and you're not gonna get fiber to your home, it's great, and it's great until it cuts out and then it's nothing. And you might wait a minute or three until the satellite goes
Right.
around again.
Or you've got
another
weather
one.
issues. Or
And exactly, yeah. So that all of those experts say fiber
fiber is
optic
what's
cable
gonna enable
going
you
straight
to-
to your home is the best option. And all of those other technologies, they use fiber optic cable as the backbone for, if you want 5G through Wi-Fi so that you're walking down the street and you have great connectivity because you're not at your house, those systems still rely on fiber optic cable.
Okay, all right, thanks, that's very helpful.
So,
Would it make sense at this particular time to do a little homework on some of the summer residents who are involved with technology or executives of major corporations who have access to, just to let them know, my thinking would be, we'd like to just let you know how we're progressing on this. And at some point, we might come to you and ask, do you have some people who could
help us.
in something like that?
Yeah,
Because I think the more you can get the word out, the more people will feel that the town's being progressive and
Mhm.
futuristic.
and that's the purpose of these public meetings.
Yeah.
Is
Right.
to get the word out that way. I mean, we can create something in the town newsletter or something like that to say, the town is working on this.
But I'm thinking sort of doing a one-on-one, literally, I'm trying to find somebody and just say, we thought, given your background and so on, A, you might be interested, but B, we just want to let you know the progress we're making. And at some point, we might ask for your guidance on something very specific.
Do you have people in mind, specific people?
Well, I'm just thinking of who would be the Rails brothers would be, just because they have such a large empire, corporate empire that they probably do. Joe Fogg, when he's been retired for a while, but my guess is he's got connections.
I bet Michael Lowry probably
Yeah, maybe.
in the tech world.
I don't know whether Billy Roberts
Maybe.
might be another one. But I think the more you can seek them out, as the broadband committee, and just say, your approach is simply to just say, we want to bring you up to speed as to where we're going. We're not asking for money. We just want you to be aware of it. And at some point, if you have technology connections, that might be helpful to us.
Is there some way you could go through a list of the Summer Residents Association and just call some names as suggestions? Or something?
I don't know enough. I mean, April, do you know who? I don't know enough about the businesses of a lot of these.
Well, is there going to be, are you making a presentation at the
Well,
SRA
I'm
meeting?
kind of asked, and I don't know, I am, but for Mount Desert 365.
Right, not for
But-
broadband.
But not specifically for broadband, but
It seems to me that.
I'm going to do 5 to 7 minutes.
One half.
Yeah,
And we have a really controversial project going on. So,
Yeah.
that's what people really want to hear about.
yeah.
But I had, I can talk to Maggie and Tracy and say, is broadband, because I did ask them that because I told them, we want to make sure that the Summer Residents Association knows about this.
Yeah.
Knows that we're doing this, that we have these meetings going on. So I definitely want to get that.
I mean,
message out
everybody's
there.
really interested in it. I mean, it's a huge topic
Yeah.
of,
I would think so.
yeah,
I'm wondering whether, you've got, your own presentation to do.
yeah.
Would Lily be available?
Because she's done that in previous years, right?
Yeah, well,
And it's
she ran
evolved
the
so
SRA,
much.
didn't
Yeah.
she?
Oh,
She
yes, she
used to,
did.
she's no longer the president of the
Yeah.
SRA, but
But I mean, but,
She's on the.
But she's on
broadband.
broadband.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
but
she is on
she's-
the broadband committee, yes.
and just to give them an update, but I still think the idea of doing one-on-ones with selected people, and the question is, how do we identify? Actually, Lily might be a good source because she's connected to the Pew Charitable Trust, and they've got tentacles all over the place.
Okay, well, our goal today was to set aside the majority of the meeting for the committee's report, and it's now 4:45 and we haven't started. Before we start, and we do have several people have to go at 5 and there aren't that many people here. My suggestion is maybe, Jamie, we start in and maybe we need to have an extra meeting to limited to discussion of
That's a good idea.
this topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we've got 15 minutes or so, so if you folks would like to launch into it, turn the floor over.
Well, what you see is what you got.
Thank you.
That was well done.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
That was succinct.
And
Time's
well,
fair.
I should say that it's, I mean, we met many times, several times. We talked a lot. This is what came out. And I guess I'm speaking for all of us in saying that we are presenting it as the beginning of a conversation, not as something for us to vote on. But I think the sooner we get to a place where we say this is what we're about, the better.
Right.
But so there it is.
Well, I wondered, is the logical place to start number 5, which is sort of the what are the about question, or we can start with number 1. I mean,
It's up to you. There was some strategizing as to the order of these. That's why we put 6 last, because we knew if that was first, that would be the end of the conversation. But we also feel, I think, very strongly that without 6,
yeah.
1 through
Yeah.
5 don't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that is, I would agree with you on that point. That's largely out of the control of this committee, but it doesn't matter here. And
Well, the committee could make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, but as a battered veteran of those wars, I would just say, hold on to your hats.
Well, isn't this the role that Jackie Hewitt filled
Yes.
before?
Yeah,
And
we
so, yeah, and
and
there
we-
were bitter fights every year to fund that position.
And I will say, Jackie really, she was like a punching bag.
Yeah.
And from day one, people decided, you know what, I don't like this woman. Or I'm gonna pretend like I don't like her because I'm not behind some of these ideas. And it was uphill from there.
Right.
But what I will say about Jackie is so many things we got done because she was willing to take the lead on them.
Exactly.
And probably
Take the
like when we're looking
Yeah.
at like
Yeah.
item 1, even this 501c4, she was all about that stuff. And it was probably the committee that kind of acted as the brake and slowed all of that down. We realized, okay, we're not ready for all this. But if you have the right person, I mean, you can get
Yeah.
so much.
And so we don't get bogged down on item 6. I would just say that we also talked about, I mean, we hope the town will be a participant in the funding, but we talked about that the town may not be sole source of funding, that there are other ways of trying to raise money.
Well, last time around with Jackie, the SRA picked up half, right?
At the beginning.
To-
yeah.
at the
And
only
there was
for a
an
year or two?
argument,
Yeah.
again, that first year, it was, the SRA was very generous and put up to 25,000. It was asking the town to agree to match. Well, that's a no-brainer, but that was still the longest discussion at town meeting here.
Right, yeah, nothing's a given.
so, well, not to get bogged down on item 6, we recognize that.
Mhm.
It just struck me that item 5 might
Sure.
inform the other
Good.
Yeah.
discussions. And I've said numerous times, we've all heard it, that, I think the committee needs a misnomer. We're really talking about sustainability. We're not trying to, bring Walmart to town. We're trying to keep a viable business community
Year round.
here so that we can sustain a year-round, help sustain a year-round community, and this summer seasonal residents have an interest in that because they want a viable community when they come in the summer, and that community is not going to exist unless we can keep people alive in the off season. So I'd be interested in what the discussion, kind of your folks' discussion was as to what the committee felt in terms of developing a vision.
Well, I think this is the key issue here, and economic development is a bad word to a lot of people, and everybody here is in favor of all the things we're in favor of, affordable housing and, you know, whatever, until
It's next door. to
it
that,
starts.
right?
And then-
As you're finding out, Ken.
Yeah, yeah, really? Right.
I'm trying to
so-
imitate Jackie in the punching bag.
And I think all of us understand that. I mean, we've been reading about these huge projects, you know, the salmon farm and the cruise ships and what's happening over on the quiet side. And I can only speak for me. I think it's horrific. So part of economic development is, I think, of this committee is to provide an alternative vision about what that could mean. That is, we're in favor of economic development, but that means different things to different people. So these guys were fabulous, especially, not especially, but Kathy was the secretary, so she did a lot of the work, and the two younger members really brought some expertise that we need.
Yeah.
I know, we are so lucky to have them both.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think being newbies helped spark conversation because they would
Yes.
address something and we'd be like, wait,
What
who's
is that?
Jackie?
Yeah.
Like, give me all the details on that. We didn't even know, or I believe you didn't know either, about this sort of sub spin-offs, the development corporation. We were like, oh, wait, what was the history on that? What did that do? So I think it helped move the conversation.
Right.
When I was reading this, one thing that floated through my mind, which is dangerous. The SRA had this enormously successful fundraising to get through COVID and so on. And I think it opened people's eyes as to capacity that people have and their willingness to help. And I don't have anything clear in my mind, but if we could develop a working relationship with SRA, if they now see themselves not just a communications vehicle, but a fundraising vehicle for viable projects and things like that, maybe that's sort of a partnership we should be aiming towards. Because I think if some of the people who were major donors and so on get excited about broadband or about some of the things we're talking about here, I think that could, you know, be the spark that might get other people to come on board.
That's a good point.
Can I ask the group a question?
Sure.
So far, I know we only have a few minutes, but so far, I think the reactions have been about the how, you know, do we hire someone? Do we raise money? And I'm curious about people's reactions to the what, you know, the items that we suggested as potential priorities. How did that sit with people? Was there something that you were surprised was not on the list? Was there something that you were surprised sort of rose to that level? Just, I'm kind of doing a, you know, straw poll or like a take the group's temperature.
I mean, the first one was a little bit of a surprise to me because I think we decided to put the EDC into hibernation for a while.
Yeah. Well, recall there are two entities, there's Economic Development Corporation, Community Development Corporation, and they are different animals legally and in what they can do. Just in broad strokes, Community Development Corporation has to participate, is designed to participate in projects that have a community-wide impact, like a park or a, you know, or a charging station.
Public benefit.
Yeah,
Right.
public benefit,
Yeah.
exactly. And the economic development is more, you know, designed to develop loan funds and other vehicles to help specific individual businesses get up and running, you know, to give them a boost. Both of them, in order to be viable, require, surprise, surprise, funding. from some source. And that's where I think we kind of ran a cropper, because we went 2 or 3 years with those, and we got the entities up and running, we got the money to get them up and running, but then we had,
Nobody wanted to ask for money.
we had no money, and the little bit we were asking for, as Martha said, at town meeting was hugely controversial, and people just don't want, you get, there was, became controversial. So I think, I don't know enough personally about these vehicles. I do believe that in most instances, the municipality is providing some level of funding to these development corporations, but that's certainly something, if we wanted to get that up and running, we would need help, we would need some help, I think, some consulting help to figure out how to do that.
Which brings, oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, Martha knows, I was one of those always skeptical about consultants in general, for years and years working with consultants that told you what you knew already and then wanted to be paid a lot for that.
Yeah.
If in fact we have 0.5, some set of ideas about this is where we want to come out, and we need to get help to get from point X to give or take point Y with some, in general benchmarks along the way. At that point, I am totally on board with getting some help to do it.
Right, right. But you're suggesting, Seth, and I agree, I think, and I agree with you. That's why number 5, we need to kind of nail number 5 first.
And to go back to Rick's point, the SRA, I mean, I don't think we should be a wholly owned subsidiary of the SRA, but they're the source of potential funds. And B, it seems to me they're also the group that would object to economic development. And, they want change, but they want things to stay the same. So if we can have a constructive conversation about here's our vision,
I think
that then becomes.
yeah, in my mind, everybody kind of wants things to stay the
Right.
same, but what needs to be understood is without some effort, they're not going to stay the same.
Yeah.
They're going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
But I think if we, in my mind, if people understood, we are trying to preserve the lifestyle we have and the business community, we'd like to have the people who work here be able to live here and those sorts of things. That's different than when you just have that label Economic Development Corporation. People think,
Maybe it's the Livability and Vibrancy Preservation Committee.
I can't resist one of my absolutely favorite quotations is the motto from Mr. Lampedusa's novel, The Leopard. In order for everything to stay the same, everything must change.
Which is very true.
I'd be interested.
The leopard
We're almost out of time here, but I would be interested in Megan and Carrie, just as the younger people on the committee and newer to the committee, what do you essentially agree with this kind of tenor of what we've been saying, or do you have a different viewpoint?
In what?
As to what we're actually about, what we should be about as a committee, what is our vision?
I think we're still trying to figure that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what you're gonna say too?
Yeah.
So where is the end point something, a community that's significantly different from what we have now? I mean, are you looking to attract?
Pretty much the same as it is now, only better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Unchanged, but
we-
different.
we talked at our first meeting.
Without changing the essential characteristics of the community, maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked, I think it was our first meeting. I think we spent the first half an hour just debating this word economic development and how it's this big
Yeah.
scary word. And when we talk about economic development, we don't mean Walmart or a Dollar General or something like that. Like, we just mean people being able to live here, that kind of thing. So I think, I mean, in our little subcommittee, I think we were all on the same page as far as priorities.
And I don't know if you guys know this, but would you talk about what your work is that helps inform your thinking on all of this? I don't know that we talked about that.
Yeah, no, so my graduate training.
day
is in-
job.
My day job is in community economic development, so my graduate degree is in economics, and so I work at the University of Maine at this independent research unit, the policy center we have there. So I work on projects for the state and for other municipalities on community and economic development, like economic impact assessments and things like that, so.
And she lives in Northeast Harbor. Aren't we lucky?
We are so super
Yeah,
lucky.
no, it's,
So super lucky.
Carrie, you
Yeah.
might do the same.
Yeah.
For this.
I work at College of the Atlantic.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I work with students who are launching businesses, and in my previous life, I helped facilitate hundreds of municipal and other types of meetings where towns were examining this very question. And yeah, it's very similar struggles throughout Maine.
Well, we are about to lose several people. Can we agree perhaps to
Another
have
meeting?
another meeting?
Yeah,
Sure.
Should we do an email to figure out the date or do that?
Now, well, I was hoping we could just.
Get it right
if-
now?
If we
Yeah.
did it like the same time next month, or if it was August batch, we wait till September.
I was gonna suggest
Next week.
next week,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yeah.
you know, if we can do it.
I
I can't do it next.
You're going
Week
away
after, maybe?
The problem, I think we're gonna run into, is try to do it too quickly, is we just don't get people.
Yeah.
Schedules to permit, but we can either do we can do a doodle poll, or we can just try to agree on.
Let's do a doodle poll, because then we'll get, how many people are we missing? 6?
Yeah, that's true.
So why don't we,
Yes.
Okay.
and let's try, I mean, I would say let's do it in a couple of weeks. I mean,
Yeah,
just
so
while we're all
people
still
are
fresh.
amenable to another meeting.
Yes.
Yep.
interfering with
I think
their
it's a
summer
good
time.
idea.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
serious,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
just getting into
Yeah.
good stuff, so.
Right, right. And the only item on the agenda next time, we're not even gonna approve
Just
minutes.
this.
It's gonna be discuss this memo.
Just
So,
this. Yeah.
And one thing that we might want to focus on at that meeting is just to create verbiage as to what our vision is, so that we begin to,
Right.
and we'll keep refining it, but I think an important point is, we don't want to see a major physical change
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
That's not what we're there for. But we do need to have broadband. We do need to be able to have, you know, low-income housing, or whatever the term is we're using.
Even moderate income housing.
Yeah.
Affordable housing.
Affordable year-round
year-round
housing.
Yeah.
And maybe we do need to think about changing our name.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
thought,
Yeah.
right?
Not against
From
that.
something that's off-putting to something that's about thriving.
Yeah.
We need young people in the faculty, so you're all getting that.
Yeah.
So then our
Sounds like
assignment
Mr.
might be
Rogers.
Yes. exactly.
to read number 5
Yeah.
100 times.
It's our homework.
That's.
Oh, okay.
You know, so
Okay.
that's what we're on, that's what our next meeting is about.
Okay. No, I
Okay.
think that's a really good idea.
And a week from today is the SRA meeting
Yes.
in this room. And I think it's going to be a hybrid, so they'll do it on Zoom as well.
It's gonna be in this room, not in
This
the.
is so tiny.
I was told it was going to be in this room. I don't know why. they're
Couldn't
not
do the
doing it at
neighborhood
Neighborhood. I don't know
You
why.
do the
They didn't book it, and there's a bridge
Conflict?
club that's there as well.
Oh, for goodness sake. Maybe could come.
So
How
it's
big
gonna,
is the
well, they get, maybe not 100 people, but a lot of people.
They get a lot of-
60
a lot
people
of people.
anyway.
It's like Mike Povich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
It also happens to
Yeah,
to
but it's a-
coincide with the Historical Society annual meeting.
Oh, it's the same.
It's exactly the same.
oh, no, really?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
We'll lose some people, but. you know.
And where is
Okay.
that?
I think that's at the neighborhood.
So how will we know about the next meeting?
I may talk to you, Darrell, about how we do this mechanically, but I'll send an email out, and we'll put a doodle poll, and
Some
we'll
dates.
have to pick the date that works the best for the most. and
Yeah.
we'll be work for everybody.
Before you do that, Dan, I wanted, before you send the poll, let's check to make sure.
Availability.
Availability.
Yeah, right.
What
Sorry,
about,
Alex.
what about breakfast
Oh, I love breakfast.
time, breakfast time?
Yeah.
Bring a cup of coffee, I don't know, just.
Well, I don't know
Like
what
7 in the
works for the, I'm reasonably flexible because I'm retired, but the people who, I'm trying to be,
Depends on the day,
sensitive to
but-
the work.
I can move stuff around and I do whatever I want.
Is morning better for people?
Well, if you do a survey monkey, maybe have a.
Yeah, I'll have those
Morning
options.
options.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you need to, the conference room in our new building is very nice, and we could offer that as an alternative space if there's something going on here.
Okay, that'd be great.
So,
Or anyway.
Yeah,
right.
It's right, the view
I
is
would
great.
love to see
good,
it.
well, come on over.
That's my last, is everybody good with in-person meetings versus, or do people prefer all Zoom meetings? Because we
No.
can.
No, this is
We
much
can,
much
we
better.
can
This
until
is
the
so
town
strange.
adopts. the
I know,
policy.
right?
Zoom. Because your friend, Mr. Lyon suggested even
Okay,
advisory
so we may not be
committees,
able to. Yeah.
committees should be going under the.
Because
new
before the
policy
pandemic,
state
we had
has.
Of being here.
Before the
With
pandemic, we had
excuses,
this
so we
whole,
can-
remember the discussion about that people on Zoom couldn't vote because of.
Right.
Oh,
The
right,
beauty
that's
of
right.
this, the law is a
That's
little
right.
stricter, but not so much. For example, this committee has a lot of people that are away during the winter.
Yeah.
That won't prevent us from using it as Zoom because they've got the excuse it's not convenient to be able to come in physically. So we have to continue business as usual all winter with a hybrid or strictly Zoom, whatever you wish to do.
But Derlin, wasn't it an issue that it was a state regulation that you couldn't vote if you came?
They, with the new they call it LD 32, removed that
Oh, okay.
restriction, so.
So should our broadband committee be meeting in person?
Once, the town hasn't adopted the policy
Okay.
yet, so in the interim, it's not ready to go, so let's just continue business as usual
Alright.
until such time as the town. votes
Okay.
on the policy.
Okay.
I think we should declare the meeting adjourned unless anybody has other business.
Is there another way of not ending the meeting, like continued or something? like
To be
that?
continued.
To be continued,
Not officially
Clever.
adjourning.
not
Pause.
officially adjourning?
Just pausing the meeting for a week or two.
And then our conversation would be a part of the minutes of this meeting,
Ah.
whatever we do then.
That's fine. So is there a motion to
Continue.
adjourn the meeting, continue the meeting?
Continued at a future date. To be declared.
I forgot to
Yeah,
take
I'll
this.
make that, whatever, I'll move to do with that.
What are we doing?
I'm going to consider that motion adopted by acclamation unless I hear otherwise.
And
That the
it's
meeting
April's motion.
essentially
To pause.
is going to be continued and to be reconvened at a date to be determined.
Soon.
So, but we will still provide public notice.
I will not ask whether we still have a quorum or not.
Oh, right, no, it's not.
It's not too bad.
We're still in the meetings.
Yeah, but Rick left.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah, but
on.
we do have a quorum because I think it's 5.
He's here.
Yeah.
All right, thank
I
you
see everybody.
all.
Thank you.
We'll get together hopefully soon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Kathy, thanks for all the great broadband